Quilty is brought to you by Baby Lock Sewing and Long Arm Machines. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Aurifil. Aurifil Italian thread, perfectly suited for all your quilting projects. Fairfield. Together, we can make beautiful things. Free Spirit. A new generation of creative and playful fabrics perfect for fashions, home decor, quilting, crafting, and more. Hovels Sewing. Cut it close with Hovels. Moda. Make something quilty with Moda fabrics. Thermoweb. Manufacturer of heat and bond adhesives and new luxe interfacings, proudly made in the USA. Hello, thanks for watching Quilty. Heather Kenyon, welcome back to the set.
Thanks for having me back, Mary.
Yeah, it's like tag team Quilty up in here with Heather and Mary. I love having you on the show. You're so knowledgeable. It's great.
Thanks. Though this is a new technique to me.
Is it really?
It is.
We're going to talk about bias binding today. And Heather, why might a person want bias binding?
Anytime they have like a curved edge or something on their quilt or scallops, or they're going to want a bias to be able to go around it.
And when we talk about bias binding, we're talking about cutting binding strips diagonally from your fabric rather than cutting binding strips with the straight of grain or the cross grain. And you told me something that just was shocking. You said you like bias binding, period. You do not make straight of grain binding.
I will occasionally make straight of grain binding if I have like a really long side strip left over from like the edge of a back of a quilt or something. I will do that. But generally, if I'm making it from scratch from something, I make bias.
Because it stretches and it gives you a little...
I have options if I have leftover. I like the stretch if I need it to cover a mistake. But yeah.
Cool. So take me through this method, because this is like, it's kind of funky looking, but really it's wonderful, especially if you're on a budget. And that's why we titled this episode What We Did, because if you need to make a piece of fabric really go far,
this is for you. Because like you have that fat quarter you'd really like to be the binding of a baby quilt, and you're thinking, no way. This way, maybe.
Cool.
And because this square right here of fabric will make this much binding.
That's a lot of binding. Can I have one end of it?
Sure.
Just pull it.
Yeah. Binding.
Holy cow. Yeah, that's a lot. This is great. Okay, so how does it work?
So you start with a square this size, and you cut a perfect square. Sometimes you can piece a square together if necessary, if you need a really big piece. And you kind of have to do the math to figure out how big your quilt is. This is approximately for a baby quilt size.
And what size is the square? Do you know what it measures?
I think it is
Let's
like,
find out.
Yeah. I want to say it's like 20-ish. 21?
18, yeah, like 21-ish.
Yeah, I think it's like 21 square.
Okay.
Roughly. And so the first thing you do with it is you would, we're not going to cut, but we're going to show you how, is cut a diagonal line through your quilt, corner to corner. You can use 2 rulers to line it up if you don't have enough.
And be careful, if your fabric's going off your cutting mat, you could fold this together and then cut it that way. And yeah, this was just a tip. If you don't have one of those really, really long rulers, which I often don't have them, because if I go to a class or I'm teaching or I come to the set, those things are kind of hard to travel with. So you can use a ruler, 2 rulers together, but just be careful. Use your safety glove to help you grip it if you're going to put 2 rulers together.
So now I have two triangles.
Yes.
Which you're going to sew back together to make a diamond.
Okay,
So
I'm going to actually take these away underneath because I want them to see
Sure,
what you're doing here.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I'll be ready. I'll be Vanna.
Okay.
Vanna
So
White
we've got
here.
a diamond. This one this way, and then I want to make my diamond. Go that way. So you line them both up. And you want to make sure that if you have a stripe, that all the stripes are going the same way. This is a plaid, so it kind of goes both ways. And if it doesn't have a directional pattern, it doesn't really matter. But you have your bias edges here on the side.
Okay.
Then you would sew those together.
Okay, we have one sewn.
We have one sewn.
Let's see, it was like this.
Great.
The way we looked at it.
The way we looked at it was like this.
Okay.
So we've got one sewn together. It's kind of important to press open on this one, simply because sometimes the seams are going to hit each other as we progress on.
Yeah.
So normally this is the part where you think, oh, and now we're going to slice our strips. But there is no cutting till the very end on this one. The next thing you do is flip it over and start to mark it the amount that you have. I do 2 1/4 inch, and I started marking one so we can sort of show how this works.
Again, with the double ruler, that might be helpful. Oh, yes, do that.
So we've got it marked from the whole way, even across the seam, and then...
And you used, here we have a fabric marking pen.
I use straight up permanent marker because this is not going to be a part of the fabric when you're done. It's going to be gone. So it has to be something that will stay. Don't use a soluble one. Don't use a chalk that'll migrate. You want a hard something.
Yes. So fabric marking pen, if it's permanent, that's no problem. You're not going to see it.
Yeah, and I would mark another 2 1/4. And eventually, if you have the perfect size square, you won't have any excess. But I usually make it a little bit bigger just in case. And then you'll have a little bit that's too big. Chop that side. Get rid of it. Okay. Then here comes the tricky part.
This is the tricky, funky, cool part.
Right.
Okay.
What I would do is I have to sew this side to this side, right sides together. And in order for it to work, you need to have your, you need to stagger them. So instead of sewing this to this and ending up with a perfect tube, you move it down
one section that
one
you've drawn.
section. So I have a little flippy end here, tail.
Show that again, right down in here, so they can see really.
So we've got our lines here. This is going to be my end section. So I'm going to move the opposite end is going to come up and match up here. And actually, I match with this one, and you want to get your pieces so they make an X and cross right at a 1/4 inch. So that was close.
Pretty close. So you pin match. That's what it's called.
Yeah, pin match right at a 1/4 inch there, and then you would pin.
I'd probably pin a lot.
Yeah,
right?
You kind of need to pin a lot because these are your biasy edges. Well, they're actually not your biasy edges, but pin a lot, pin a lot, pin a lot, all the way across, and you get this weird handkerchief sort of shape.
But keep the faith because it's going to work. It's going to turn out.
We would take this over to the sewing machine and sew this whole piece and then press it. Again, probably press open. And you end up with this crazy tube. Notice I have a little pin in one end.
Yeah, what's up with that?
That is to help remind me not to sew it into a continuous cylinder, which is what I did the first 2 times and ripped out and was like, okay.
You can send thank you notes to Heather Kenyon via Quilty for that little tip. That's great.
If this safety pin has gone into your seam, you have gone too far. Go back, match up again.
Very good.
And what you do now is you'll take the scissors.
I'm going to get up close on this because we're going to cut it.
Sure.
So I want to make sure.
And you cut in to you cut along your tube line. And essentially you keep cutting and cutting and cutting like you're coring an apple sort of, or peeling an apple, and it just peels away, and what's left is, well, this one's magically folded already, but is a whole strip like this. You can kind of see that I have I have my boo-boo wrong ways lines on this one, and then a little bit of lines on the end, and press in half, and you have enough binding to do a baby quilt.
That is really cool, man. And also, it cannot be understated, a great pair of scissors. I mean, did you hear that sound when she was cutting that?
Yeah.
It's like butter. It's like shunk, shunk, shunk. Have a great pair of scissors when you're doing this because you're not rotary cutting.
Maul your binding if you tried to cut them with paper scissors or something.
And you can't rotary cut it because you've got to do one layer at a time.
Yeah, you'd go through.
Great scissors. We like hovels. Plus, pink, purple. Either way. Heather, awesome. People are going to love this show. They're going to love it. They're going to do it and use it. I will too. Bias bindings, pretty great to have. Thanks.
You're welcome, Mary.
See you next time on Quilty. Bye.
Quilty is brought to you by Baby Lock Sewing and Long Arm Machines. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Aurifil Italian thread, perfectly suited for all your quilting projects. Fairfield, together we can make beautiful things. Free Spirit, a new generation of creative and playful fabrics perfect for fashions, home decor, quilting, crafting, and more. Hovels Sewing, cut it close with Hovels. Moda, make something quilty with Moda fabrics. Thermoweb, manufacturer of heat and bond adhesives and new luxe interfacings, proudly made in the USA.